to the Real Collective podcast. As always, I am Sean Tasse. I'm joined with special guest today, Rebecca Spencer Mountain. Hello, Rebecca.
Hey, how's it going, John?
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks so much for doing this. As always, guys, if you are liking what you are hearing, hit that subscribe button. Download this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hit that like button. Share this with your friends or family who might find some value in what we're talking about today. And what we're talking about today is how you, as the consumer, whether you're buying or selling a house, can get out of your own way. So just a little bit of a background. Rebecca and I work together. Rebecca is a high-performance coach, one of the premier high-performance coaches in the country, in the world, maybe.
Oh, wow.
and does a really great job helping out her people. And so I'll let you talk wonderful things about yourself. You can say a whole bunch of nice things about yourself before we get into how it might apply to people buying or selling houses.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I'm a high performance coach. I've written 2 best-selling books, my latest of which is called The Dragon and the Goat, which is all about why we don't do the things we really want to do. Yes, there's one there, which just happens to be behind my shoulder. Who knew? But yeah, so the book was actually the culmination of the question I had, which was, why don't people do what they really want to do? So, in the context of today's question, you want to buy, you want to sell, but you're kind of sitting on it. You're not really doing anything. You're second guessing, you're going back and forth. You're making a decision and then going back on it. Why does that happen? So the books are about that. I do public speaking all across North America, helping people to get out of their own way in whatever way they've created these series of blocks in front of themselves.
And you come by it naturally because you have a crazy space that you come from.
Yes. I grew up in a cult. So it was very isolating, very frightening, very rule-based place, put me in a teeny tiny little box. I left it in 2008 after rolling my car on a 6-lane highway, which sounds dramatic because it was, but I was always told that if I even thought about leaving, there's 2 ways I was going to die: cancer or a car crash. So when I clearly did not die, my entire life sort of unraveled. I began to question everything. And that was the beginning of my journey to face what I've called in my book, the dragon, that part of us that holds ourselves back. And I physically removed myself from the cult and from some bad relationships and bad situations, but I actually mentally dragged it with me. So over time, after about 10, 12 years, I had a wonderful rebuilt life, but I still felt miserable. And this is where I do a lot of my coaching, is understanding people just feel like there's something missing, something wrong, and they have searched outside of themselves. It's a relationship. Well, no, that didn't fix it. It's the business. It's my bank account, right? It's this, that, the other. And when they've kind of gone through those things, but they still feel like garbage, that's where I come in and I'm like, okay, let's actually talk about the inner dragon and some of the machinations that go into that prevent us from living our goat life, which is why it's Dragon and the Goat. Ghost, of course, is greatest of all time.
Yes, it's an acronym. And you know how much I love acronyms. So, and I'm just hearing your story back. There's a part of me that thinks, maybe the part of you did die in a car crash and the part of you was the old part of you. So, if that was the parable that you thought would happen, is, hey, I'm going to die in a car crash, part of you did, right? And so moving forward, I think that's really neat. So what have you seen in terms of those machinations, those things that happen in people's brains as they're going through a process of a lot of, here's what we run into, right? We run into people with either buyer's remorse or seller's remorse, or people say, hey, I want to do this thing, and then they get in their own way. They self-sabotage. Right?
So self-sabotage is a symptom. It's a factor of you kind of rolling in some disbelief, some challenges, and some confusion that you have within. So one of the methodologies I've created in the course of my work was what I call the GOAT path. So the GOAT path is all the different steps that lead to where we are today. So I'm actually going to go in reverse order, starting from our reality. So most people, when they're like, I don't really like where I am, will start to take a bunch of actions, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, you'll just like say, oh, I need to run Facebook ads, or I need to, do this or that. And they'll start looking around at what everyone else is doing and try to copy and mimic. Same goes for if someone's like, oh, I don't like the house that I'm in. They just like, okay, I'm just going to go and psychotically, call Sean 17 times a day, like, Sean, where's the houses? Or they'll look on MLS and like hunt things down, and they'll end up looking at all the wrong houses, which makes them feel bad. Because what I'm sure you see this, they're like, my budget is, 1.5 million. But they'll go look at a $2 million house, which is not the way you want to go, because then you're like, ooh, I like this, but I can't afford it. So sad. And then when they go look at a house they can afford, it looks nothing like the $2 million one, and around we go. But they keep taking action, hoping that if they do enough of that stuff, it'll change their world, but it doesn't. It actually makes it worse. So then the question then becomes, what drives our actions? And what drives our actions is sort of the next step backwards in the train station, which is our beliefs. Mm. What we believe determines how we act. If we believe that we are not good enough, then we hold back. No, like we might take action on things, but we'll always do little self-sabotage stuff, right? So someone who doesn't believe that they can do it, someone doesn't believe that they can move, they don't believe that if or sorry, they say they have a belief, say that if they move, they're going to become, house poor, and they won't be able to afford anything. And oh my God, the mortgage is going to be so big, and then the payments, and then the kids, and then the dog, and then where they go. So even though they may be acting as if they're going to make a decision, they don't believe that they can actually pull it off. And so they'll never actually pull the trigger, and they pull back. That's where you get buyer's remorse, as someone who plows through that disbelief, does something they probably shouldn't have done, and they're like, oh crap, right? But it's because the belief that they were basing all of their actions upon wasn't actually pointing in the right direction. And so that's kind of how it is. So you have to believe that what you're doing is the right thing, and then it just seamlessly goes out. You won't sabotage yourself by looking at a house you can't afford, right? And then getting all squidgy because, that's what you really want, but then your bank account doesn't, show that you can actually do that, blah, blah, blah. So then my question was, well, that's fantastic. How do you believe in yourself? How do you believe in the process? How do you believe in the future? And there's two train stations that kind of go back from there, and they're very closely linked. One is, how do you feel about yourself, about the transaction, about your future? And then what do you think? What are the thoughts that actually start rolling around in your head that will then, again, dictate the lens through which you see the world, which is your belief system? So the whole GOAT path is actually, it's rooted in how we feel, our emotions. And we like to talk about this lots, right? My clients, I drag them through their feels every single day. Because if you can articulate in complex language, instead of just mad, sad, happy, right? It is, what version of mad? Are you frustrated? Are you disappointed? Right? And instead of, maybe you're fearful, but like, fearful how? In what way? Are you worried? Do you have fear, which is, I'm scared today? Like, I have a fear of spiders, right? There's a spider up there. Really don't like Mr. Spider hanging out and staring at me right now, right? Or am I anxious, which is a future-based fear? Like, this isn't going to work, right? So there's all these different ways that we feel, that if we don't allow complex words to identify the feelings, our brain doesn't know what to do with it. And so it just kind of doesn't fire to solve the problem. So, and our feelings drive our thoughts, right? Which is, I can't do this. I'll never be able to afford this. I don't deserve good things, right? So it could go in a whole bunch of like really dark places. I mean, good ones too, but we're wired for negativity. So if you can imagine, to stop this giantly long explanation, if you don't like where you are right now, you don't start, and the example, if you don't like the house you're in, you don't start by psychotically looking all over the place for a new one, because you're not really sure what you want, how you feel, and so on. So you have to say, well, what do I believe about this whole process? what do I think and how do I feel? And when you start at the emotion side and go, what am I thinking about it? And how can I adjust those? How can I clarify my emotions and get more emotional regulation so I'm not stressed about the process? Because that's what emotional regulation does, simply by giving words to what we're feeling and adjust our thoughts to instead of, oh, I can never afford this, into, well, what can I afford? And you start asking some helpful questions, your belief system starts to naturally adjust. And then your actions will go in line and you will make the right decisions. You will look at the right houses. You will ask the right questions of realtors like you. And then you're going to get the exact answer, the exact house that you really deserve.
I find that a lot of the times, personally, when I'm having negative thoughts, it's the first thought that jumps into my head that comes from the past programming, or whatever the results are that give that programming.
Sure.
First thought that jumps in is not the right one, and oftentimes I'll have to sort of reset myself and say, no, wait a second, that thought is coming from this other place.
Mhm.
And I'll have to almost say to myself in my head, here's what the reality is. And it's that's the one point in that whole train lineup that I feel like I can have an effect
Mhm.
on it, right? And so, by saying, if the first thought that comes in my head is, well, I won't be able to afford that house, then the next thought that goes into my head is, I need to ensure that I'm finding the right house for me and my family. Or,
Mhm.
right. So now it's not about that house, it's about doing the right thing for me and my family. If
Mhm.
it's, hey, you know what, I want to upgrade from the house that I'm in into the next house, and I'm like, oh, but the car payment and the school district and all of these different negative things that are coming in. I think one of the things that we do as agents is help people bring them back around. Okay, well, why are
Mhm.
we doing this? Why are we going through this process, right?
Mhm.
And getting the people back in line, and drilling down and really understanding the why behind, what's the real reason, and not
Sure.
the reason that you tell everybody, but like the real reason, right? And
Mhm.
that's what you do too.
That's exactly what I do. And you make up a good point where the thoughts that immediately come out of our brains, they're the reactive thoughts. So we have three different brains. We have the emotion brain, which is just a hair trigger. We feel instantly, both emotionally, but we also feel it physically. So fear or anger or whatever will, sweaty palms, racing heart, tight, throat, kind of constricting feeling, those kinds of things. And our instinctive thoughts will come with it, the thoughts we've thought often enough. But you're absolutely correct. There's actually two things you can do to control those instinctive responses. One is by giving your emotions a complex name. So we have what called the emotion wheel, which, in case anyone's watching the video of this, looks like this. If you're not watching a video of it, it's a wheel with at the core some very, very broad based emotions like happy, sad, mad. But it gets more and more specific as you go out, because then your brain can do something with it. So if you teach yourself, instead of just saying I'm happy, sad, mad, I am, complex, complex, complex word, your brain's like, oh, it immediately kicks in the thinking part of our brain, which will stop the reflexive thoughts, right? Again, that through habitual thinking pop up, like you said, like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to afford this, and start to challenge it, right? And so it's called emotional regulation. It's also challenging assumptions. So there is an assumption in your story that I can't afford that house,
Right.
right? One of the actions people can take in order to show that they're taking control of this, the self-sabotaging process, is to say, who can I ask that would know if I can afford this house or not? Like, I don't know how to do the math. I call people like you, Sean. Should I renovate or should I stay? Right. I literally went through that conversation with a local realtor. She has sold my footprint house 11 times. So she kind of knows the house. And I said, if I want to move into a house at this price, what do you think I can get for the house that I'm in? And she's just like, yeah, stay. Because we haven't really renovated and it really, yeah. Builder carpet, builder beige. It's awesome. Yeah. So these kinds of things I can't figure out myself. But if I'm too afraid, oh, it's a stupid question. That's an assumption. Says who? Stupid according to who? Right? You would never find it a stupid question. You want to help. And so you have to challenge the assumptions you make about what other people think or feel or are going to say or how they're going to react. And you have to challenge the stories you tell yourself. I can't afford it is an internal story. Sean's going to think this question's stupid is an assumption. Both of these types of stories, when challenged and just turned and pivoted a little bit to say, is it fact or is it fiction? And if it's fiction, find out. So fact, fiction, and if fiction, find out. Where can you get the information? What can you do about it? How can you, do the math either yourself? And if you can't, which most people can't because we don't sell houses for a living, who knows this information? And that to me is one of the greatest values of realtors. And I work almost exclusively with realtors in North America.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I think that's a perfect spot to take a quick pause, and we'll jump right back into it in the second half. This is awesome. This is really good conversation. I really hope that there's a lot of people who are taking this in, who are listening to this, because this is really the stuff. I mean, sure, you can apply it to buying a house, but you can apply it to life in general, right?
Anything. Mm-hmm.
That's the whole idea here. So as always, guys, feel free to schedule a consultation with me. You can click my Calendly link below and do that. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that is awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with people who might find value in here. We'll see you on the other side.
This episode of the Real Collective podcast is brought to you by Real Collective. Real Collective brings together best-in-class real estate agents and collective experts in the field to deliver the best possible service to our clients. We govern ourselves with honesty, open-mindedness, and compassion. With diverse skill sets, our agents are able to better serve a wide array of clients, including first-time buyers, first-time sellers, transferees, estate sales, investors, and rural, vacation, and luxury properties. Authenticity and transparency are pillars of our process, which allows us to put our clients at the center of everything we do. Our years of experience and knowledge allow us to deliver prestigious service and optimal results. If you are interested in buying or selling your home, contact us today at realcollective.ca.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Real Collective podcast. If you were watching in the first half, then you probably were. I don't imagine that you're just jumping on halfway through a podcast. It'd be weird if you were. But if you were, I'm here today with Rebecca. We're talking about The Goat and the Dragon, her most recent book, and how it applies to how consumers are moving through the real estate process. We work obviously with a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers. People, a lot of the times as they move through this process, it is a very emotional process. And understanding what's happening in your brain, understanding what's happening in your heart and in your gut and in your feelings, really helps move you through, I think. So as always, if you're liking what you're hearing, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, download, share it with your friends, download on Spotify, download on Apple, iTunes, whatever, podcasts. And you can click the link below to schedule a private consultation with me, and we can unpack some of these feeling pieces. So specific to the book, Rebecca, what do you say? What's the difference between the dragon and the goat?
So the dragon and the goat are the two sides within us that war against each other. And the dragon is actually our lizard brain, but lizard didn't sound scary enough, so I called it a dragon. Way more evocative. So the dragon is all the parts of us that want to throttle back in certain circumstances. So fight, flight, freeze, right? So something happens in our world and we want to do one of those three things. Most often our brain wants to do flight or freeze. It doesn't like fight because there is risk of injury. So it will fight its way out if it needs to, but we usually do, run away, or we freeze and everything goes blank. The other one is fawn, which is people pleasing. I did a video recently that actually got quite a few views on the difference between being nice, which is enabling, and being kind, which is actually being clear. And a lot of people they stay in nice land because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Yeah, I know. We talked about this, right? So that they don't want to hurt people's feelings. They want to live up to other people's expectations. They want to make their parents proud, their spouse, their friends, their colleagues, their whatever. And so they stay in this endless goo of trying to interpret what other people want.
Mm.
And so the dragon part of us is old. So it's the evolutionarily speaking, it is the oldest part of our brain. If you don't like the evolutionary model, just imagine whoever put us together, just put that through first. And so it's the one that kicks off the fastest. We cannot stop the reflexes that come from our dragon. It's also the contrast effect, what we use to compare ourselves to other people. All these are part and parcel of our dragon. Those, a few pieces, there's a lot more, but those are the big ones.
You do a lot of speaking engagements in the States. I don't think there's a lot of people who are watching this that are in the States. And I imagine most people who are watching this are likely in tune with an evolutionary model of existence. But hey, you never know. And
you never know.
Everybody's allowed to believe whatever they want. So
again, I make no judgments, right? This is part of my evolution, my personal evolution.
Appreciate that. And so what are some key strategies to shrinking that dragon?
So the shrinking part is actually interesting because you'll note it's not slay the dragon, which is what we normally feel like we should be doing, but it's shrinking because the amygdala, a little almond-shaped little ball kind of right behind our eyeballs. And the more we live in anxiety, self-sabotage, guilt, shame, fear, all those kinds of big things, the more we throttle back, the more we stay in our comfort zone, stick with what's familiar versus doing things that actually make us happy, the larger those actually get. So the shrinking of the dragon is strategies you can use to actually physically shrink those, which lowers your anxiety and calms the nervous system. So very simply, the first thing in the first part where I talked about naming the emotions, that's actually where you start. Processing physically how you feel, scream into a pillow, punch a punching bag, go for a run, burpees, sit-ups, whatever. Let no one be hurt as you physically process this. This is for you to get rid of the energy that you have coursing through your body. Meditation, breathing, like those things, emotional regulation, meditation with breathing. If you do those, it's been proven clinically that if you do 5 minutes a day of those things, your amygdala will shrink by 10 to 15%, which means your anxiety goes down. You don't get overwhelmed by emotions. You hold your brain, you keep your cool. You don't just sort of like blurt stuff out to people. You can solve whatever problem is in front of you, whether it's what do I do, to discipline my child? How do I have a difficult conversation, or do I move or do I stay, right? And how do we make those kind of decisions? So those kinds of things. In the book, The Dragon and the Goat, there are more than actually almost 24 strategies on how to shrink the dragon. There's also another 24 on how to live your goat life, your greatest of all time life. But just to shrink that part of you, there are multiple strategies that you can use that incrementally, when done together, even if you do 2 or 3 of them, the idea is to not necessarily do all, but even if you say, I'm going to work on emotional regulation, meditate 5 minutes a day, and I'm really going to challenge my stories and assumptions, the stuff in my head, like fact or fiction, if fiction, go find out. That was what you're going to do, your entire system will start to relax.
And none of this stuff is new. Like, this is all stuff that people like, hey, you should do this. And like Eastern philosophies have said for years, you should be doing this sort of thing, right? And it's, and people will always give the excuse, oh, well, I don't have time, or I don't this, or I don't that. I'm sure you.
And what's interesting?
Go.
Inconsistency, avoidance behavior, and procrastination are all rooted in actually one thing. And when I found out this thing, I was like, no, there's no way that is what drives this. Oh yeah, I should do that kind of thing, but don't do it. So I hunted through white papers. I went through down the rabbit hole of a whole bunch of different books and research and, videos, and they're all consistent. Inconsistency, avoidance behavior, and procrastination are all rooted in a lack of self-worth.
Wow.
That's where it all comes from. And you're like, oh, but I feel good about myself. If you say, I feel good about myself and I'm totally cool and wonderful, but you avoid certain things that you should be doing, you're inconsistent, you say, I should do that, which is the equivalent of I have to, I've got to, I should, I want, I wish, I hope. All of those kinds of phrases actually indicate a lack of self-worth because you are not actually committing to yourself. The only way you know you've committed to yourself and your self-worth has taken a big leap forward in health and wellness is you say things like, I am meditating today at 2, 5 minutes. You can go on YouTube, look up 5-minute meditation, pick the first one, sit back. Doesn't matter where you are. You can lie down, sit down, stand on your head, whatever, as long as you can relax, right? So that's where it actually comes from. And it's really important to understand that. And, the book again goes into multiple strategies of actually rehabilitating your self-worth. That's a lot of the GOAT work that you do, the, 24 odd strategies for that, because you need to repair that feeling of I'm in control. I make myself happy. I set the rules and nobody else. I run my business, like personally, very differently than anyone else does. Most coaches have a team. They think you have to have a team or a business partner, and you have to do certain things in order to be successful. But as an autistic woman, that doesn't work for me. I don't get along with people. Like I can't read faces. I'm not diplomatic. But I love what I do. And so even though the coaching world says, oh, you should do this or you should do that. And again, you've got neighbors. Oh, you should do this. You should do that with your house. Oh, your business, your career. You should do this with your kids. Good grief. Mother guilt is a big thing based on what other people want to tell you what to do. Father guilt is actually not as strong. Just psychologically speaking, you guys you weather it better than us women. And I can give you a whole bunch of books that prove it. But anyways, I'm not just being sort of stereotypical. But when you can actually focus on that control and I am everything I need, all the answers I have are here. I just need to pull apart all of the things that are blocking it. Then your natural goatness actually goes through without effort.
People need to stop shooting all over themselves.
They should all over themselves. Makes a giant mess. Very stinky.
So just before we finish, I've got one more thing. So actually I've got two. I'm sorry. One is why do other people think that living your best GOAT life is selfish? Why, like, there's that
Mm-hmm.
and people who are trying to live their GOAT might feel selfish for doing that. That's
Mm-hmm.
one question, and I'll ask you the second one, and you can do them back to back. And that is, what is your best advice to people who are constantly feeding their dragons? How can they stop that?
Okay. So the selfish part is what I've come through with like my clients. So I've been doing high performance coaching now for almost 4 years through high performers at all different levels, where they throttle back. They're like, oh, but I can't do that because so-and-so is going to think I'm being selfish. So first of all, selfishness is getting what you want by stomping on others and what they want. Being self-validating, right? So to be living your GOAT life is to say, I will say for myself what is okay and what is not okay. I will communicate it. I will be kind, but I will protect those boundaries. And that's how I want to live my life, because this is what makes me happy. If you have never set boundaries before for yourself and suddenly you're just like, hey, this is no longer okay, but this is, and you start communicating that, because other people become uncomfortable because they would actually like to do that too, but they're all rolled up in whatever they're dealing with. They will accuse you of being selfish to make it okay for them to violate your boundaries. So boundaries are not set to make other people comfortable. They're set to make you comfortable, but it can be sometimes uncomfortable in how to actually protect that. And there's a whole section in my book that goes through how do you set your boundaries, how do you communicate your boundaries, like actual words you can use, and then how do you actually protect them. But that's why it can be construed as being selfish. It is not. It is self-validating, self-care, self-worth. It is generating everything you need from within and no longer depending on it. And if just one last tiny thing, if you have been depending on other people and they know you've depended on them to be happy, feel worthy, validated, and you're like, I don't need that anymore from you, can be very disconcerting. And they feel that they can no longer be a hero, and it starts to shake their world. So that's the answer to the first question. Now, the second question, which if I remember correctly, was what are some of the steps people can take to really start living their GOAT life, like their greatest of all time life? That wasn't the question?
No, stop feeding the dragon.
Stop feeding the dragon. Okay, well, They kind of go hand in hand. One's sort of like chicken or the egg. That's
That's
why, again, it's a constant battle. Like one of these two things always win. The one that wins is the one you feed, which is the tagline for the book. So, how do you stop feeding the dragon?
true.
One of the things you can do right now to stop feeding the dragon is accept for yourself. This is sort of a mantra you can make for yourself or whatever, to say, I am everything I need.
Yeah, right now.
Right now, sitting where I am, your dragon will scream at you, no, you don't. You're an idiot. You don't have the answers. Who do you think you are? But the more you say, I may not know which way to go, I may not have all the answers, but I am everything I need. I have all the answers. And now all I need to do is find out, where have I hidden them, and to recognize as you go down this path that you'll figure it out. So it's not a matter of having the answers. It's the attitude of I'll figure it out. It's not a matter of saying, I know what's going to happen, but to truly believe that whatever happens, you can handle it.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole thing starts. Because then if you take that with, I am everything I need, and I don't like saying enough, because that just, it feels hollow and wrong and somehow missing something. But I am everything is all encapsulating.
Yeah, yeah.
I am all the happiness. I am all of my control. I am all of the confidence I need. I am all these things. And when you use that I am language, which you see over and over and over again, all over the place in books, magazines, articles, you name it, that I am language is so incredibly powerful, because you stop shooting all over yourself. Wishes don't lead to riches, almost rhymes close enough, that kind of a thing. And you just say, it's me.
Yeah.
Whenever I ask people, what's the number one thing that is preventing you from getting what you want in life? Me.
If it's to be, it's up to me.
You got it. We can look up a whole bunch of other quotes too, but yes.
That's a thing I've been told since I was a teenager. Amazing. This is great. Thank you very much for joining me. How can people find you or this book?
So the book is on Amazon. So you just go to Amazon, and it's The Dragon and the Goat is what you look up. And if you really want to find it real quick without scrolling through, there's some guy who did a comic book called The Dragon and the Goat. Really problematic. Looks cute though. It's The Dragon and the Goat, and just type in Rebecca Mountain, right? So that'll take you straight there. If you like the book, you can leave a review. Those are always so hard to get. If you want more information about me, so videos, blogs, services and stuff, it's rebeccamountain.ca.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I super appreciate it. I'm always ecstatic when I get a chance to spend some time with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, guys, if you liked what you heard, feel free to share this with a friend. Hit the like button on the channel, subscribe to the channel, download it on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And if you'd like to schedule a consultation about buying or selling or investing in real estate, that Calendly link is below in the comments section. As always, you can reach out directly. And until next time, keep it real.
Collective.